Rain tapped gently against the glass windows of the downtown cafe, a soft percussion that mirrored the rhythm of Julian Hart's thoughts. Julian, a self-made billionaire known for his icy demeanor and relentless work ethic, seldom took breaks. Yet here he was, nursing a black coffee, lost in reflection, a rare pause in his otherwise meticulously scheduled life. It had been years since he'd last seen the people who had once surrounded him in his humble beginnings, people who had believed in him when no one else did. The door swung open, bringing in a gust of wind, and with it, a sight that made Julian's heart skip. A young woman, smiling nervously, entered with two little children clutching her hands tightly. There was something hauntingly familiar about her, a spark in her eyes he recognized instantly. "Clara," he whispered under his breath, almost afraid to speak. Clara, his former assistant, a woman who had worked tirelessly by his side during the early days of his startup, was standing right in front of him. Her eyes widened as recognition dawned, and a quiet gasp escaped her lips. "Julian, I didn't expect." Before words could carry further, the twins tugged at her coat. They were identical, with golden brown curls and eyes that mirrored Clara's warmth. One of them, a little boy, peeked curiously over her shoulder and asked, "Who is that, Mommy?" Julian froze. The sight of them, two little versions of Clara, was both a shock and a revelation. He had never known she had a family, let alone twins. His mind raced with questions, but what struck him first was the serenity in Clara's demeanor, even amidst the storm of surprise. She had endured life, raised two children, and still carried herself with grace. These are my twins," Clara finally said, her voice steady but tinged with something Julian couldn't immediately name, pride, maybe, or quiet resilience. A long silence stretched between them. Julian's heart thudded with memories of late nights in cramped offices, of dreams scribbled on napkins, of laughter shared over coffee and the exhaustion of starting from nothing. Clara had been there through it all, yet life had pulled them in entirely different directions. You look well," Julian said finally, his voice softer than usual, almost vulnerable. Clara smiled faintly. "Life's been busy," she said, glancing down at the twins. "And yours? I heard about your success." Julian chuckled dryly, a humorless sound. "Success isn't always what it seems," he admitted. His eyes softened as they fell on the twins, who were now examining a vase of flowers on the table. He realized how much he had missed. Moments like this, ordinary yet profound, the kind that money could never buy. Then, almost instinctively, Julian asked the question that had been burning inside him. How have you been, Clara?" "Really?" Clara's expression shifted. There was a shadow behind her eyes, one that spoke of struggle and sacrifice. "It hasn't been easy," she said quietly. "Raising twins on my own, trying to keep things together. But we're happy." Julian leaned back, the weight of his thoughts pressing on him. He had built empires, made headlines, and accumulated wealth that most could only dream of. Yet as he watched Clara's children laugh and play quietly by the window, he realized something important: he had never truly known happiness. Not this kind, the kind born from connection, from love, from selflessness. The twins suddenly scampered closer to him, and Julian caught their shy smiles. They were unafraid, curious, and something about their innocence broke through the walls he had so carefully built around himself. "Do you want to sit with us?" Clara asked gently. Julian hesitated, the magnitude of this simple gesture hitting him. To sit with them, to share this moment, required vulnerability he wasn't used to. And yet, he nodded. "Yes," he said softly. As they sat, Clara told him snippets of their life, small victories, little challenges, everyday joys. Julian listened, sometimes offering advice, but mostly just absorbing the richness of their existence. Each story, each smile, each laugh reminded him of the person Clara had always been: compassionate, resilient, unwavering. It was then that Clara's secret revealed itself, almost casually, yet with monumental weight. "You know, Julian, I always wondered what would have happened if you had remembered me when things got hard," she said. "If you had helped me when my job ended and the world seemed against me." Julian's throat tightened. He had forgotten that when the company had expanded, he had overlooked her, and the position she loved had been taken from her in a reshuffling he had barely noticed. He had assumed she would be fine, that life would carry her along. But now he saw, in the resilience of her twins and the gentle strength in her eyes, the human cost of oversight. I'm so sorry, Clara," he said earnestly. "I never knew, I didn't realize how much you sacrificed, how much you endured. Clara reached out and took his hand briefly. It's okay, she said. We survived, and maybe, meeting you again, it's fate. Fate, Julian realized, had a curious way of delivering lessons. Sitting there, he felt a profound shift within himself. For years, he had defined success in numbers, in acquisitions, in power. But here, in the warmth of a small cafe with a former employee and her children, he recognized a different measure: humanity, kindness, the ripple effects of compassion. Moved by the encounter, Julian made a decision, a leap that would change everything. Over the next weeks, he quietly arranged support for Clara, financial security for her family, educational opportunities for the twins, and assistance in pursuing her own dreams. But more importantly, he became a consistent presence in their lives, not as a savior, but as a friend, a mentor, and someone who genuinely cared. The twins, oblivious to the complexity of adult lives, welcomed him wholeheartedly. They called him Uncle Julian, after a tentative day spent building a toy train track together. And Julian, who had once measured life by contracts and balance sheets, now measured it by laughter, shared meals, and quiet evenings reading bedtime stories to two little children who had unknowingly taught him what it meant to be rich in spirit. Months later, Clara and Julian sat together on a park bench, watching the twins chase a frisbee in golden autumn light. Julian felt a warmth that no boardroom victory could ever match. You know, he said softly, I thought success was everything. I see now, it's moments like this. Clara smiled, a serenity in her expression that came from enduring life's storms with grace. And you're part of it now, she said. Julian nodded, heart swelling. The secret Clara had carried, the struggles, the quiet strength, had changed him profoundly. It reminded him that true success was not in what you amassed, but in how you impacted the lives of others. A single act of generosity, a single moment of compassion, could ripple outward in ways he had never imagined. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Julian realized something essential. Life's richest treasures were not contracts, not empires, not titles. They were the bonds we forged, the love we shared, and the humanity we nurtured. And in that understanding, he found peace, purpose, and a happiness that had eluded him for decades. He watched the twins laughing, Clara smiling beside him, and he whispered quietly, thank you. Not for the children, not for the moments, but for the lesson, that even in the midst of power and wealth, kindness could transform lives, and a second chance could make all the difference. Julian knew, as the wind carried the laughter across the park, that this encounter would forever remain the most precious story of his life, a story of redemption, compassion, and the extraordinary power of the human heart.